And welcome to another episode of Patriots 4th and 2. I am your host today, Derek Havens, and joining me as always is Mr. Steve Balestrieri. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Patriots preseason debut versus the Texans at home. An absolutely thrilling competitive matchup, which Steve and I have plenty to discuss. And we're also going to be talking about a couple of roster transactions as well as our final thoughts from training camp as they kind of wrapped up and they head into joint practices for the next couple of weeks here with the Packers and the Titans. So, Steve, before we kick everything off, my man, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Surviving the heat.
Yep.
I've never been so sleepy in a Patriots game. It's like, man, that was not a lot of excitement in that game. So
it was brutal at times.
Yeah, it is what it is. And when I saw the starting offensive line list, I kind of had a feeling it was going to go that way, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, we will. And, I will just say this. It is exciting to have the team back on the field. And it's always, we talk about baby steps, with minicamp OTAs and then training camp and then pads, and it kind of ramps up slowly, right? And that's the exciting part. And there were a couple of exciting moments. There were some good things to talk about. There were some bad things to talk about. I would say, for starters, if we just dive right into it, Steve. And for one, I just have a really small, quick little rant. It's not even really a rant. It's just a disclaimer, really. I get incredibly annoyed when people complain about the score of preseason games. Like all over my timeline last night, it was, I can't believe the Patriots are going to lose this game. I would just like to remind everyone back in 2007 when the Patriots went undefeated until they weren't, that they lost every single preseason game. Just for FYI, okay? I have said this before and I'll say it again. Focus on the product, not the result. Okay, I don't care about the score, but I do care about how it comes about and how these young players play, because these younger players that are playing a lot, they probably didn't get a lot of reps in practice. And Bill Belichick essentially said the same thing today, or last night, I should say. Yeah, anyways, go ahead, sorry. Steve. No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, he did say also, with the play calling, that they had a number of plays that they wanted to run.
Sure.
Obviously, they wanted to see where they were at with these certain plays. I know the screen game was figuring greatly in this one. And I think that had a lot to do with it. It seemed like they were just running screen after screen. But, he said there was no game planning, involved.
There never is. Just so people know, there's never game planning involved. The only quote-unquote game plan involved is, like you said, they want to run, hey, when we get into second, third yard, in short, let's really focus on our running the ball up the middle and really do some live reps. They want to get goal line stuff in, short yardage. Oh, hey, we really want to work on these play action or this certain RPO. If you get into this down and distant, this is what I want to look for. Excellent. Or one way or the other. It's like that is what they're looking for. They're not worried about game planning, Steve. It's all about plays and situations.
Yeah. And again, the score means zero in these type of games. We never worry about the score in preseason games unless, if somebody's piling it on you, then you have to be concerned. If it's like 42-3, then, you have to look at, okay, there's a lot going wrong on the field. But like you said, there was several positives that they can take away from this and several negatives.
Absolutely. And I'll just say this. Let's start with the offense, or at least I'll start with the offense. I obviously, Bailey Zappe had a lot of snaps in this game. I got a lot of reps, and which was good for him. I thought that he showed a couple of good things in terms of kind of processing quickly on some option routes. I thought I thought he had a couple of good throws, had a couple of throws that should have been caught that weren't. He had a great throw on that Tyquan Thornton 27-yard catch, which was a great play by Tyquan too. One of the few highlights of the evening. I would say I would say the biggest negative would be the offensive line. Wow. If you are not concerned about this offensive line right now, I don't know what to tell you. And I will say, obviously, this is not their starting unit. I understand that. Although you could make the case that Connor McDermott could be playing a significant role this season. But I will say this, Steve. If any of those guys go down, these are the guys who you're replacing them with. And they did not do a whole lot to inspire much confidence, whether it was pass protecting, run blocking. The offense had 88 yards and 4 first downs with 5 minutes to go in this game.
Yeah.
I mean, they couldn't get it. They couldn't move the ball.
No. And, again, when I saw the starting offensive line, they had McDermott at left tackle, and we know he's playing right tackle. And there's a reason he's playing right tackle. It's because he's not a left tackle. So I was like, okay, if, the Texans are starting or playing, any of their starters for, a series or two, or, their top backups, it's going to be rough sledding. But it was rough sledding all night long. And I know why they left him in so long, because they wanted to see if they could gel, and it never did. It never did. And, they didn't pass protect well at all.
Nope.
The Patriots gave up 3 sacks in the first half. I think it was only 15 pass plays. So that's not a very good percentage. And again, there was nowhere for the running backs to run. Again, it was kind of like looking at last year. The defense played pretty good, and the offense looked really out of sorts, And I was like, man, this is deja vu all over again, as Yogi Berra would say.
I would say that the other thing was obviously the running game. Couldn't get it going there. I thought there was a couple plays here or there. Again, pretty much like everything else, but a lot of negatives. I would also say that's a big indictment as well on the offensive line. Obviously, I thought the Texans front seven,
they played well.
I thought I don't want to say they were dominant, because I don't know. Again, I don't put it's a give and a take in this preseason situation, Steve, right? But I thought they played better than pretty much any other unit that was on the field. And I'm not surprised. I mean, given DeMeco Ryan's background as a linebacker in this league, given his time with San Francisco and what they've been able to do in that defense, I think the Texans defensive front seven should be good. I would expect nothing less for that area to be extremely well coached, et cetera. And there's a lot of excitement in that building for him, and he's an intriguing young guy, and it'll be curious to see. On a total aside, it'll be curious to watch his career and see how it goes. Where you see so many young offensive-minded coaches, now to have a defensive-minded coach and DeMeco Ryans. I mean, he's only, I think, 6 years older than me. I think he's 39. So he's a young guy, and it'll be interesting kind of just to watch that, because it is a tiny bit of a palate cleanser from the next offensive guys, and he seems like a good leader. So he certainly was as a player. Anyway, just kind of thought that is a curious side note, Steve. Give me something good, bad, I don't care, indifferent. Let's try to focus on the offense. Let's stay on the offense for a little bit.
Well, you mentioned that was a dime that Zappe threw to Tyquan Thornton. I thought that pass was zipped in there. That was a tremendous throw. Malik Cunningham, I thought his best throw was incomplete, because he rolled out to his right and again threw a dime in the corner of the end zone to Trey Nixon, and he dropped it. I thought that should have been a touchdown. And Tyquan Thornton, I thought on that play with Zappe, I thought he made a tremendous catch there. He got way up.
High pointed it nicely.
Pointed it nicely. I think he only played like 5 offensive snaps, but he caught 2 passes, 31 yards. So, that's a good sign for him. Obviously, he was only targeted 2 times and he caught both passes. And that first one I thought was a beauty. So, I think it's a good sign for him, the guy who been struggling in training camp, see him go out there and make a splash play like that. I would have liked to seen what the offense could have done with better protection, especially for Zappe. Because we all knew Trace McSorley hasn't had a good camp, but I would have liked to seen better stuff from Zappe. But again, he had no protection. I know he completed a vast majority of his passes, but those were dump offs in the screen game, which Belichick said they were going to try to do.
Yeah, for what it's worth, Tyquan Thornton had 14 snaps on offense
14
last night.
snaps?
According to Mike Reese, correct. Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was fewer than that.
Yeah, so he had 14. That catch specifically, like I said before, great throw by Zappe. Really nice throw. A hard one to make kind of up and over and then to drop it in there. Great job by Thornton getting off the line. And then, again, finding that soft spot, making that catch. That's what he needs to bring to the table. I'm not expecting, him to make this huge jump, but we want to see progress moving forward. He needs to be able to stay on the field and to be able to contribute. And if he cannot, people talk about wanting to utilize his speed, Steve, and wanting to, work him into the offense. They need him to do that. But unless he's able to be more than a one-trick pony, I don't know if his long speed's really going to matter much. And so he's going to have to make those plays and bring some kind of level of threat. I'm not saying that he has to be the number one guy, but when he's going to be that third, fourth receiver, which he seems like he's going to be in this offense, Steve, he needs to take advantage of those opposed to him on the third, fourth depth chart on the other side at cornerback or defensive back.
Absolutely. And, I think when a guy like Juju's on the field, the defense is going to probably put their best corner on a guy like Juju. I mean, for the simple reason that he's the most talented wide receiver the Patriots have on the roster right now. And so, it'll be imperative for a guy like Thornton with his speed, not so much the deep ball, but those, the short and intermediate routes where if he can get some space, and some separation, that's where his speed comes in. It doesn't have to be a 40-yard pass. Now, that one last night, it was 3rd and long. They had to try to air it out. And, I thought him and Zappe clicked really well on that play. And again, it all comes down to protection. He had the protection there. He spun that one good. But, yes, they need Thornton's speed and not just as a deep threat, one-trick pony, as you said.
Right. It can't be. It just won't be effective enough, Steve. Any other thoughts from on the offensive side? I mean, there's a couple of different directions to go. I would say, what's your take on Pop Douglas really not getting a lot?
I was just going to say that.
So he had 2 snaps. He had 2 snaps on offense last night. I will say this. Some people have said that maybe he didn't get a lot of snaps because, he's already done so much in practice. They're trying to save him. I don't know if that's the case. It might be the case. I think Bill Belichick's explanation of why certain guys got more time than others is because some guys didn't get enough reps in practice. And we've seen that Douglas has gotten a lot of action in practice as your timelines have been flooded with what he's done each and every day. Now, again, I think people need to temper expectations. I think if he can be a contributor to the offense and he can find that slot role, he doesn't have to be a top 2 or 3 receiver in this offense to be a find. If he can be a contributor on this offense and potentially grow with the team as a slot receiver, whether it's this year or moving forward, that's still a great pick in the 6th round. I mean, so I think people should be excited for what they've seen. I think that there's I don't even know if I'd put it at 10%. I think there's I'll say 10% chance that Bill Belichick didn't play Pop Douglas because he's hiding him. I don't think that's the case. I think he got a lot of action and he was trying to give other guys a look. That would be my best guess, Steve.
Yeah, I think that also because he's not going to hide him. I mean, it's been in the news and video, all spring and summer. So, his name is being thrown out there nationally, not just, in New England. But I don't think it was hiding. I think that they look at him, they know what he can do already. And like you said, some of the other guys who haven't been getting a ton of reps, they're getting some game action and, they're getting their feet wet. And, the team is going to see what they can do on the field. And, guys like Trey Nixon, he got a ton of reps, I thought, last night. I didn't see the exact breakdown, but it seemed like he was on the field a lot. Yeah, I would have liked to seen Douglas get thrown a pass or two just to see if he could get out there and make something happen. But I totally get where they're going with that because, I think they know, I'm not saying he's a starter by any means, but the guys that are starters and that they know what they can do, they didn't play last night. So they got him a couple of snaps in there. I think he had a couple of special team snaps too. I think he fair caught a punt or a kickoff or something or other last night.
Yeah.
It wasn't in my notes, but yeah. I was just a little surprised by that. That's what I was going to bring up offensively because I don't know. I'm just curious of what he can do in game action. He's been lighting it up in practice, so maybe we'll see that in joint practices next week with Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be an interesting one to watch, Steve. And how I think it's fascinating how the team and how not just the Patriots, but all teams are managing this new preseason kind of layout. The sports science behind it, the reps, the recovery. There's just such a balance. It's just such a weird kind of dynamic there. Give me your take on the running back situation, Steve. Let me see here. Pierre Strong, 15 snaps. Kevin Harris, 15 snaps. Obviously, we had J.J. Taylor, who had 22 snaps. I think J.J. Taylor is about as lockety of a lock of a practice squad player that the Patriots are going to have. Excuse me. And I will say this. I know how bad the offensive line was. I fully admit that's an issue. And that was an issue last night for the backups. And it did affect the running game. I'm saying this now, Steve. August 11th, we're recording the show. If the running backs play as poorly in next preseason game and or joint practices, Ezekiel Elliott will be a New England Patriot by next weekend.
I think that's a good prediction. But again, they need somebody to open the holes a little bit because these guys can't be getting hit consistently in the backfield or at the line of scrimmage. You have to give them a lane to run. And I find it hard to find fault with those guys because simply, I mean, there's nowhere to run. You're getting hit in the backfield. You haven't even got a head of steam going yet. They need better offensive line play. And I know last night was a patchwork, offensive line. And some of them were playing actually out of position.
Yep.
But at the same time, you got to do better than that. You have to. It's not fair to your quarterback, your wide receivers, or your running backs because it's hard to judge them, until we see them. Okay, if you give them a lane and they miss it, that's on the back. If you give them a lane and they burst through and then get to that second level and make some people miss, then you have a good idea, what your running backs can do. But, we've been saying that since last July.
I feel like we buried the lead a little bit here, Steve. We haven't even talked about the rookie numbers that were assigned. I mean, we haven't even discussed this. And I'll get to the defense because there's a certain player on defense who's going to deserve a whole lot of praise here shortly, which we will get to. Okay, we are just starting with the offense. So before anyone jumps down our throat, we're going to get to the defense. But yeah, no, the rookie numbers were in. Loved Pop Douglas in 81. Butte in 80. Interesting. Loved Keion White 99. I also thought that I'm glad that Bryce Behringer, the punter, he was 99 in college. I'm glad he went to just 9. I think that's a good punter number. Okay. We got to get Christian Gonzalez out of 19.
Yeah, it was just seeing weird 9 out there punting because, because of who didn't.
Right. It was I don't know. Anyway, so I just gave, if anyone's interested in rookie number talk, I just gave you 15 seconds on it. That's all I can do. But I would please people wait to buy your jerseys for these rookies because the numbers often change as the roster whittles down. So please save your money because those jerseys are expensive.
And they will change.
And a lot of them will. Yep. Hopefully Christian Gonzalez because I don't want the 19. That just doesn't sit with me the way I want it to. So
I wanted something in the 20s, like 24.
I was hoping 24 because 24 has been a very good number for the Patriots defensive backs. With I'm sure there's prior before this, but you talk about Ty Law, Steph Gilmore, Darrelle Revis. That number holds some weight. 24 we need to get Christian Gonzalez in 24 immediately. So that needs to happen. And by the way, we'll get to the defense. Continuing with the offense, Steve, I thought Chasen Hines showed up a little bit towards, at times I thought and I thought Connor McDermott at times on the offensive line both had their moments. James Ferentz continues to be an absolute disaster if he's not at center. If he's at center, it's better. City Sow has had a really really tough time in camp, and he I don't know, in the game he was much better. Again, people were getting pushed around, and I'm not saying, by the way, those two guys I mentioned, they didn't have their warts. Again, everybody did, but there's a lot of shuffling parts, a lot of open roster spots on that offensive line, Steve. I didn't really see anything. Honestly, this is going to hurt for me to say, but I was really disappointed is a word I hate to use because I always feel like that should be reserved for like parents to be talking to their kids. So like if anyone said they were disappointed in me and it wasn't my wife, a close friend, or my parents, I would tell them to GTFO. Okay. But I was a little bummed out because I feel like Trey Nixon continues to ride the wave, Steve, of up and down where he has these opportunities. He played 94% of the snaps last night at 49 reps. And he can make a play here, make a play there, has a strong camp at one point, then he gets hurt. He gets into a game action. He had a chance to make a great catch right in the end zone off an absolute rope from Malik Cunningham late in that game, bounces off his hands. I mean, there were times, Steve, where he's had opportunities, and I didn't think he was going to make the team anyway, but he's really right on that. Like, who's the kid that was, I think he went to the Raiders, Christian Wilkerson? He's right on that line where he might be elevated for a game or two, probably be on the practice squad, etc. And I just feel like he's close, but no cigar for me, Steve. And I don't, for one, I don't think he has a chance of making the team, but I'm starting to wonder if someone like Kayshon Boutte will actually have a chance to pass him just because he's a younger guy. And if Boutte does enough to plant him, I think Trey Nixon could be seeing his papers and just not be in the mix at all, potentially.
Right. I think Boutte is headed to the practice squad this year. I'm not sure he makes the initial 53-man.
I don't think so either, Steve, but not to cut you off, but I would say I think that there's a chance they try to keep him on the week 1 roster and then move him to the practice squad once cuts are made, because he's a guy who he had a decent little pedigree coming out of college, was really high, a high ranked prospect. And if he gets cut, I'm not sure he comes back, where they could maybe have a veteran that's not subject to waivers or anything. And they say, hey, stick around town. You'll be back in the mix. And that way they don't have to guarantee the veteran salary because they're not on the roster week 1 for the entire year, which is the rules. They can sneak Boutte on, in week 2. Just a thought, Steve. Just a thought.
Yeah.
But
and again, that's what I was going to caveat that last statement, because a guy with his size and speed, I know a lot of teams might covet that, especially, where he started off slow in training camp, but now he's kind of turning it on a little bit.
Right.
Not saying he's lighting it up or anything, but he's starting to make plays and, putting days together where he's making plays. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, I agree with you on Nixon because, again, I mean, we've been waiting for this guy to, I'm going to throw in the Taylor Price thing.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, where you break out, this is going to be where he breaks out. And last night was a prime example of that. He made a couple of catches and, he was involved with the offense. And then that play in the end zone, I'm thinking to myself, he comes down with that. One, it's going to just put his confidence through the roof. But he didn't. And I think you could probably hear a collective groan from the coaches because it's like that's been his MO. He can't put it all together. So,
right. I totally agree. It's frustrating. It really is. And I'm wondering, where else, what else we see. Again, he had the most offensive snaps. He had the most catches, but he only went 4 for 23. I thought it was good to see Pierre Strong get in the mix a little bit in the passing game. I guess, Matt Sokol is still a guy I'm watching on somewhere. Claire's ears just perked up. I think Matt Sokol's a guy who I think is, Anthony Ferksker and Matt Sokol are kind of battling it out for that third tight end spot. I have to believe they're going to carry 3 tight ends, Steve. I have a hard time believing they're only going to carry 2. So
yeah, I mean, there's going to be
I
at
don't know.
least 1, possibly 2 tight ends on the practice squad because, I really like Ferkser because he's a proven receiver. And the fact that he didn't play last night kind of leads me to think that they're liking what he can bring to the table. Because I didn't see him in the game. I might be wrong. I haven't looked at the snap counts, and I'm still not quite used to these guys' numbers. But I did not see him on the field. At least he didn't show up where I was looking. But where he's I'm not saying really good, but he's a receiver who can catch 30, 40 passes and has done so. But he's not a quote unquote inline blocker. A guy like Sokol or Lumpkin, the guy that they brought in, those guys are big and
very big
and physical. They're like having another offensive lineman. So I'm kind of torn with that one. That's why I think they're going to put at least a couple of guys on the practice squad. Scotty Washington, everyone's still on the hype train with him, but he doesn't show out very well.
I agree. And sorry, I keep muting my mic. If anyone's wondering what the delay is, I'm typing and it just thunders in people's ears. If I type it, I'm trying to go through all this, a bunch of little information so I can continue to move things along here with certain things. But no, I agree, Steve. And I still am keeping my ears to the ground, eyes peeled, however you want to say it, for a veteran tight end if they're released over the next few weeks. I think veteran tight end certainly a position to watch. I think running back is absolutely a position to watch. I am pretty underwhelmed overall at quarterback outside of Malik Cunningham. Malik Madness has now the Zappeites have now converted to Malikism. I will get to him in just a second, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to make of the quarterback position, Steve. I think Mac Jones, we know that this is Mac Jones's team. I just love the fact that people continue to talk about a Mac Jones and Bailey Zappe quarterback battle when it was pretty clear that Mac Jones is the starting quarterback. If last night didn't tell you anything, it should. And, and then now that people are slowly realizing that quarterback battle is non-existent, now they hate each other. If you haven't read the latest updates. So, and they might, and I don't care if they do or not. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, they're too competitive. Just to go on a side, this is a Russ Goldman-esque media rant. If they do hate each other, I really don't care. By the way, if they both aren't like super like huggy buddy because they both want to be the starter, I would respect them more for it. They both want to be the quarterback. Bailey came in, and I think a lot of what he did was overrated last year, but I also think he did a good job while he was in there, given the situation he was in. We all know Mac Jones was dealt a bad hand, whether you like him or not, and Mac's probably wanting to get back to what he was like after the first year when he was done with his rookie year, when a lot of people were saying he should have been the first overall pick in the draft, which I thought was a little strong, but he still had a good year. And Mac's it's not like Mac didn't hear the boos from Gillette at times last year or all the Zappe talk. And it's not like Zappe didn't say, hey, you know what? I did pretty good last year. Both guys should want to be the starting quarterback, Steve. So if this story, and by the way, it's not all talking heads, because like even Karen Guregian had something, in her story, and I respect Karen. She's one of the best writers the New England area has in general. Forget about just sports. Just, she's extremely firm. She's fair. She's balanced. She does an excellent job no matter what platform she's writing on. But and you know what? And they might not interact a lot at practice, but maybe it's because they're both competitive players and they both want the job. I don't look at it as long as it's not a detriment to the team in any way, which I don't believe that's the case. I wouldn't really worry about it. Anyway, end of rant.
Yeah, McSorley kind of put that one to bed too, because he said,
yes. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, that inside the quarterback room, the three of them talk all the time. So, and along with Bill O'Brien. So, it's like they hate each other. How do you know they hate each other? I thought that was funny, but that, being what it is, yeah, I saw all the comments last night on social media. First of all, then they said Cunningham should be the backup and move Bailey Zappe to the third string. And I'm like, okay, this is a guy that played for 1 week in training camp at quarterback, the rest of the time at wide receiver. And then I was seeing the really interesting comments. I'll leave it at interesting. Some people were saying he should be the starter. And I'm like, there was a reason they waited to put him at quarterback until the last 5.5 minutes. And that was the fact that the Texans had a lot of guys on the field that, will be out of work in about a month. So, but at the same time, was he electric? Absolutely. Was he fun to watch? Yes. That was the only time I was wide awake after the first few minutes of the first quarter. He looked really good. He was fun to watch, but he's not a starting quarterback in the NFL. Please, But he did inject some life in the crowd. Let's face it, he did do that.
He definitely did. And, I would say, you have a couple of different guys here. Obviously, you're more, I would say, traditional quarterbacks with Mac Jones, Bailey Zappe, Steve. And then you have Trace McSorley, who I think is your prototypical practice squad guy. I'm not expecting much out of him. Malik Cunningham, I thought, was interesting. Can we dive into him real quick before we switch over to defense? Mm-hmm. But I would just say with him, I thought his arm talent showed at times. I think let's see here. I think his arm talent showed at times. I thought his, that juke he had for the touchdown, I thought was awesome. You can see his athleticism, great feet. He was keeping his eyes downfield a lot when he was getting flushed out. I mean, I don't think he's ever going to develop anything, but I don't think it hurts to have that guy in the room, Steve, when you're going to be facing a lot of mobile quarterbacks, especially one right out of the gate in week 1. And I think he helps you prepare for those. And you might have something to kind of work kind of work towards and, kind of build with. And look, who knows? I mean, maybe after a year in the system and a year working on his mechanics and maybe next year he's able to kind of push somebody, who's ever under center. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think with the kind of clay you have in Malik Cunningham, the kind of athlete he is, I think he's worth hanging around. Whether he's on the practice squad right away on the roster, I have a hard time believing he'd make the 53-man roster, but I wouldn't totally put it past him. I think McSorley has no shot at the 53-man roster. He's practice squad or out. Malik Cunningham, I think there's an outside shot because I think they could look at him. If he continues to get some reps and he makes a couple plays, I think they'll look at him and say, he will not come back to us. He will land on a roster somewhere. And I think they might try to keep him and then maybe put him on IR later in the season if they want to go ahead and stash him for next year, Steve.
Absolutely.
All right, let's step aside real quick. We'll take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about the defense because we have a few guys to talk about on the defensive side who showed out last night, and we will be right back after this. Okay, and we are back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Again, myself, Derek Haven, Steve Balestrieri, both joining you to discuss the Patriots' preseason debut last night in a loss versus the Houston Texans at home. Steve and I spent, I should say, the first half of the show discussing the offensive players, kind of the offensive performance from Thursday evening. We are going to flip to the defensive side, have a couple of things to note. Before we do that, I would like to mention, please subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Please like, share, leave us a review. Keeps us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. I know we're available on Spreaker and pretty much anywhere you download podcasts, but Apple, YouTube, definitely please subscribe. It would certainly help us out, and we would be very appreciative. Again, please check out PatsFans.com for some great content. Which is of course, both of our home base, Steve, as we've gone back for over a decade there with Ian Logue, Russ Goldman, and all the other great content creators on PatsFans.com. Let's get back to discussing the Patriots season debut, Stephen. Let's switch gears to the defense. I almost felt it was a disservice to Keion White to start with the offense and not talk about who I thought the best player on the field for the Patriots was last night. But the Patriots' second-round rookie showed up and showed out hard. He was, I don't want to overblow it because, but he was absolutely in the mix quite a bit. He played 27 snaps, a little over 40%. And I would say I thought he was impressive from an edge standpoint, bull rushing, speed to power. You saw him play with that edge. I think he just plays with a very kind of calm before the storm kind of demeanor, Steve, if you know what I mean by that. Like, he just seems so controlled but violent at the same time.
Yep, he definitely is that. And he's so quiet. He doesn't talk basically at all, which is rare in this era of sports, stars or whatever. But it seemed like at least every other play when he was on the field, he was being disruptive in some way. And I thought he showed out extremely well. He got pressure on a quarterback. He was blowing up runs, and he laid a lick on CJ Stroud. It was just, all the stuff we heard about him, you could see it out there last night, and it's like, this guy is going to be really, really good. I believe he's going to be really, really good in this league. I think he was the best player on the field for the Patriots last night. And, what a great, debut it was for him, especially in front of the home crowd. I think people got excited about him because, especially in OTAs and mini camp in the first couple of days of training camp where they're not in pads, you couldn't really see what he could bring to the table. I think you can see what he brings to the table now.
100%. And I think a lot of Patriots fans should be excited about what they saw from him. He's someone who can play inside, outside, on the edge. He's a guy who as they say, fills out the uniform. One of those guys you want walking off the bus first when you're pulling into stadiums. And I'm not worried about Christian Gonzalez. We'll get to him in a second. I'm not worried about Christian Gonzalez. I don't know. I want to temper expectations with him because I think people forget he's a rookie. But, man, if you can hit on a guy like Keion White and he's able to kind of bring what he is, there's a lot of hype about Marte Mapu, and I want to get to him. Even though he didn't have a lot going on last night, there was something that caught my eye, Steve, that I want to bring up to you about him. But I will, I will say this about Keion. I was excited about what he can potentially bring to this front seven, and they continue to have some very intriguing young pieces on that defensive side of the ball, Steve. And Keion White had an awesome debut, and I certainly think, like I said before, I thought he was the best player on the field for the Patriots last night.
Yeah, and, that first series where Jalen Mills intercepted C.J. Stroud, it was White who flushed him out of the pocket and made him, scramble to his right side. And, I just thought he was fantastic. But, another guy who I thought showed out really well last night, and his number keeps throwing me off at number 33, Anthony Jennings, I thought was really strong last night as well. He had one sequence in there, I think it was on Houston's second possession, where, again, he was in the backfield. It seemed like every down he was disrupting things. He got a big hit on the quarterback. I think Jennings and Keion White. Now you add those guys into the mix with the guys they already have: Josh Uche, Matthew Judon, Dietrich Wise, and now you have two other pieces in there that can really play significant reps.
I agree. I certainly agree. I would also like to bring up, so Christian Gonzalez too, Steve. Some people were, I don't want to say underwhelmed. I mean, I don't really think he did anything wrong. I know that first pass that was completed on him, he got trucked a little bit, a little like, hey, bud, these reps. I kind of laughed because I was like, hey man, these reps are live. Okay, so you played 39% of the snaps, 25 total snaps overall. I thought Jalen Mills in that secondary, I thought Jalen Mills played very well, and I thought he was one of the better players again for the Patriots last night, playing all over the field. I was almost surprised he got so much run, Steve. I was a little surprised by that, maybe because they've been letting a lot of younger guys in practice and they wanted to kind of warm him up. I'm not sure. I wouldn't read too much into it yet, but it's something to monitor because I can't see how they wouldn't keep him given their cornerback and defensive back depth overall.
I think just if you look at the safety room, Duggar didn't play, Phillips didn't play, so it kind of narrows down their focus, who they can, get out there and have some depth in case somebody gets dinged up. So I think that's why he played so much. And plus that, the fact that he was playing safety a lot in the game. So, I thought that was, it was good experience for him. He hadn't done it since he was in Philly. So I thought he showed great technique. He was playing that, I think they call it a robber technique on that.
That's an Evan Lazar question.
Yeah, that interception. But, the thing that stood out to me when I watched the replay, Dell, the wide receiver for Houston, absolutely turned Jack Jones around. He was wide open. But Mills made a great play. He made a great read on it. And he jumped that route, and that was a tremendous interception. And, for all the hate that Mills gets from Patriots fans, when he's back there at safety, he's a good football player.
And people forget, too, I've said this 100 times, his best year in Philadelphia was his last year when he was at safety.
Yep.
And I think in a perfect world for Jalen Mills, he's someone who's not really a top 2 or 3 corner for you. He's someone who can play cornerback, when necessary, but he can move all over the defensive backfield, have some versatility. And he's really the only quote unquote kind of mold free safety that they have, because I think they're going to use Kyle Duggar a lot in that role, Steve, just with his ball skills. But I also think that might be doing him a disservice to some of his best strengths too. So that's a dangerous game. And by the way, they need to get Kyle Duggar under contract soon, because I'm worried he's going to have a huge season. And when I say worried, I think all Patriots fans would love to see it. What I wouldn't like to see is him resetting the safety market and free agency next offseason if they can't figure this out. And that's something that, we'll have to kind of keep in mind here. I want to mention to you, Steve, Marte Mapu last night was doing a lot of charting on the sidelines, and people have said he's played safety, he's played in the box, he's played on the edge, he's moved all the way around, Steve. He seems like that Swiss Army knife piece that they've been looking for a while. He was doing a lot of charting, I think, was it Belichick or Gerard Mayo? Did you see what I'm talking about on the sidelines
Yes.
last night? I was just a little surprised, because to me, I took it. I'm going to go. I wouldn't spin it as a negative. I really don't know what the negative would be to say about it. But I thought from a positive standpoint, I was thinking to myself, wow, they really trust his kind of football intellect to kind of keep tabs on certain things. And I feel like a lot of times with rookie Steve, and we've said this before, but a lot of times with rookies, Bill has traditionally given these young guys one job, one position, one responsibility. And with him, he's had seemingly multiple different positions, multiple different responsibilities. Now they have him doing things for the coaches on the sideline in terms of tracking certain things, maybe looking for certain things from their own, self-scouting perspective, or just kind of tracking whatever. I don't know. I'm going to look into it and say that he is someone who I think they think very highly of from a football IQ standpoint. And I don't think that they would be giving him some of these responsibilities on the field or on the sidelines if they didn't think that he was, ready to kind of take that on. And I think people should be very intrigued with what he can bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. It shows trust. I mean, granted, it's a preseason game, but it shows trust in him where the coaches were like, we want you to chart these things out, look for tendencies, whatever he was doing, I mean, that tells me that they have plans for this kid even more. Now, granted, he's been wearing a red jersey all through training camp, so he's probably not 100% or yet at this point, but I just think, he's going to be another guy that plays some significant snaps this year. And, for the top two draft picks that they had that were on the field last night, I think those guys acquitted themselves really, really well. And, you have to like what you saw defensively when especially White was on the field last night.
Right. No, and I agree. And, I want to mention, Daniel Aquale, I thought kind of did what he did. He's very good in his role, Steve, at as that interior pass rusher. I thought he got hosed on that quarterback roughing the passer call. I will say, if they're looking for any kind of contact to the helmet, even if it's small, his left hand hit the quarterback's helmet. I thought he went. I would love to see if the league is going to do that and they are going to review things. I'd love for them to review it and see that the contact was minimal and he did a lot to kind of get out of the way and not hurt the quarterback, not put his body weight on him when he falls, which is another point of emphasis. I understand that these referees and these officials with these guys are very big and moving very fast, and there's 22 players. They're all trying to keep track of. It's a lot. I'm not saying the job is easy. It's not, and I'm not necessarily blaming the referees because I think it's a very tough position to be in. But I thought that was a weak call. I can understand in live action if a referee saw a hand to the helmet, even small, why he might call it. I just thought that was a bad call, Steve. But I thought it shouldn't really take away from Aquale's performance. I thought he kind of does exactly what he is. He's not a full-time player for you, but a nice rotational piece that can really push that pocket and give some interior penetration.
Yeah, I thought he showed up well too. I mean, he got that big sack where I think it was like a 15-yard loss, on that opening drive, which led to the interception. And then, he was in on that play where he got the roughing the passer, and granted, his hand did touch the helmet, which is in essence against the rules. But like you said, he was going out of his way to try to avoid that. I mean, if the league's going to call that consistently, fine. But if they're not, then it was kind of ticky-tack. But the one thing I did notice, the coaching staff wasn't really, laying into him when he came off the field there. So
no, they weren't. They weren't at all. I also want to mention, I thought Diego Fagot, I thought he played pretty well. He did have that really, really bad special teams penalty, which was dumb. That was a really bad mistake, but I thought he was relatively active throughout the evening. And he's someone who they think very highly of in the building. I would say Chris Board, another guy who's kind of, he's a very limited defensive player during the NFL season, but he's a very big special teams player. He's not going anywhere. I thought both of those guys were worth a mention. Joshua Bledsoe, Steve, I thought played pretty well at times. It wasn't all good, but it wasn't terrible. He also played every single defensive snap, all 64 snaps he was on the field for. I still think you and I have been long interested in what he brings to what Joshua Bledsoe brings to the table. I think that he is really right on that line, Steve, because they have so many guys, but I do think he will land on a roster and be a contributor somewhere if he doesn't land here, because that room is deep. And I know we're both kind of interested in him, but the other guy I want to mention is Isaiah Bolden. And he's gotten a lot of run, Steve, this week. I thought he got some action last night. Really didn't do a whole lot, good, bad, but I still think he has the inside track to make this team as the last cornerback on with his special teams contributions. I think you'll see him a lot on kickoff returns this year, and they'll save Marcus Jones more for punt returns. Just a thought.
Yeah. I was intrigued to see what they were going to get out of him last night. And, he had some good and bad moments. That weird play down at the end zone at the end of the first half, I was having flashbacks to that Seahawks Super Bowl when the ball popped up in the air and the guy caught it. And, great play by the receiver. I think that was Dell as well, Tank Dell. But I'm
by the way, I loved Tank Dell coming out because he reminded me exactly of Marcus Jones, and he looks like a guy who could be interesting. I thought for sure the Patriots would have been interested in somebody like him because he's explosive, Steve, and great concentration catch. I thought that was a good call by the refs. That was a hard call, that touchdown catch. It looked like it was good to me.
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, he had control just before his foot slid out. And, it was a bang-bang play. They had to go to replay on it. But I think from the naked eye when it happened, I thought it was a touchdown.
Yeah.
And then when they re-showed it, I was convinced it was a touchdown. And I know Zoe was saying he was out of bounds, but that's Zoe.
That is Zoe. I do want to mention the specialist, believe it or not. But before I do that, Steve, because I want to do the specialist and then we'll wrap the show. But any other defensive player you want to mention before I want to go to switch to the specialist?
Well, I was just concerned, what's going to go on with Carl Davis because, I know he was on the ground for a little bit and then he walked off the field, but you never know with these things. We'll have to see what plays out. But he's a guy that's played significant snaps for them as well.
I agree. Absolutely, I agree. That's something to keep in mind, for them. And I want to definitely could be a big loss, in the middle. I don't think he's a really, really important player to the defense, and they can't necessarily find another guy that's similar. But I still think that he fills a certain kind of role, and I think they would have to replace him if that's a significant injury. So something to keep in mind, because I think the beef in the middle is important at times, especially short yardage, etc. What did you make of, Steve, the fact that they had Chad Ryland doing the kickoffs, but Nick Folk had the lone field goal attempt? Do you think it was a situation where they just didn't get the opportunities to kick the field goal, so we didn't see Ryland? Or what do you make of it? I thought it was a little interesting.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they were hoping they were going to score more in the
I'm
game
sure.
so they could get both guys involved, or even get in field goal range where, they could test them out. It just didn't work out that way. I'm sure that Belichick had in his mind that, Rylan was going to do the kickoff and then they'd alternate between, field goals or extra points. And then at the end, they just wanted to test out, their 2-point conversion offense there. It was a perfect time at the end of the game. And, because I know a lot of people were confused on why they were going for 2. They would it's just, playing out a scenario where you might need that later on. Let's see how this particular play works.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it was definitely something new. Definitely something to keep in mind.
Joel had a
Yeah,
good
Joel,
question.
I was just about to read that. Yeah, I think they were testing Nick Folk's range in the beginning. I think so. Joel, and that crossed my mind too. I would say this. I feel like they know what Nick Folk's range is. I mean, and I wasn't at practice, so I didn't see it, but I have seen, I do understand that, when you're watching guys kick certain distances and, where it crosses through obviously between the uprights is important, obviously, first and foremost, but how high the kick goes through often is an interesting indicator. And consistently, it's been like a consensus of almost everybody that was in attendance is saying that, Chad Ryland, when he kicks his kicks, they're like, towards the middle or the top of the uprights, where Nick Folks are consistently above the crossbar.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what to make of it. I don't think they would hold on to 2 kickers for the entire season. I guess you could talk me into, because Bill is he's nothing if not a little different at times. Maybe he tries to sneak. You can't just burn a high draft pick on a kicker. I mean, Riley, that would be an incredible asset waste. And I don't think they'll do that, but there's something to be said about the consistency that Nick Folk has brought you. And even if Ryland has the better choice in the long run, it's still something that you have to keep in mind. And Nick Folk is kind of the epitome of a guy from Bill Belichick, where it's like you'd rather be a year too early than a year too late on a guy. And I think they've gotten more juice out of that fruit than they expected to when they signed him all those years ago. But I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I know that Bryce Behringer has been really impressive in camp. I thought he shanked a punt last night, Steve, and it was still better than almost anything they had last year, which I thought was hilarious. His hang time is terrific.
But it rolled and ended up being 58-yard punt.
Yeah, his first one, I think, was like a net 62-yarder or something like that. And I was like, dang, that was, I mean, I just was impressed with his leg, because flipping that field position is incredibly important. And when you have an offense that I think is going to be slow to develop, as the Patriots do, and when they have a defense that I'm expecting to be certainly one of the better ones in their conference, I'm anticipating, that punting will be incredibly important. 4 punts, 200 yards, 2 inside the 20. I thought that was a pretty good debut for the punter, who I think has gotten a decent amount of buzz. But thanks for your comment, Joel. Steve, I want to wrap the show up. So give me your final thoughts. I guess we can spend our final thoughts even talking about the Patriots did sign old friend Trey Flowers. Only received $50,000 in guarantee, Steve, which I think goes ahead and shows you that he is by no means a roster lock. He obviously didn't practice or participate since he's been signed. I'm sure it's going to take him a little while to get into football shape. I think Trey Flowers is a prime practice squad candidate that I think they would elevate at some point, over the next, couple weeks of the year, Steve, if I had to guess. And then they also signed Joe Gillis-Harris, who came out of Duke a couple of years ago, started as an undrafted free agent with the Jaguars in 2019, joined the Bills in 2021, had 3 starts. He's had 3 starts in his 17 regular season games that he's played in, 18 tackles, 1 sack, actually in the same hometown as Devin McCourty. I thought that was kind of interesting as well. But he's someone who's had a little versatility, another guy in the division who has some special teams ability, has some versatility. I'm not sure he's going to make the team, Steve, but I thought I wanted to make, as part of my final thoughts, I wanted to make note of those 2 roster changes the Patriots made in the last couple of days.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the Patriots keep Trey Flowers on PUP through the cuts, and then they can bring him on later.
I think that makes a ton of sense. I by no means expect Trey Flowers to have an active role week 1 with this team. I think there's a chance he's still really young, by the way. You don't think he's as young as he is, but let me look this up real quick because I
think he's 29.
I want to say he's 29. Yeah. And it caught me off. I typed in the wrong thing. Let's see if I can find it still. Yeah, he's 29 years old. So he's younger than I think a lot of people maybe think he is. I know that, certain guys, especially guys in the trenches, can age quickly given, the kind of reps that they've had and the violence that they go through. But I think that, Steve, your idea is a good one where he's on PUP for a bit. They kind of give him a rolling start, and maybe he's a contributor several weeks into the season. I could see it. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't make the team, given his guarantees. But I think that the more likely scenario is it's kind of a rolling thing. Any final thoughts, Steve, before we wrap up the show and get ready for joint practices next week and another game next week?
Yeah, hopefully we'll see a better product on the field next week during joint practices in the game with the Packers. I want to thank Joel and Anna for their comments.
Yes.
And shout out to Russ and Ian. I appeared with Russ on his short 15-minute podcast on Sunday. And,
are you doing it this Sunday, Steve?
I think so.
Okay.
That'll depend on, what Russ's schedule is and what he wants to do. But
well, I'll just say this, so for a long time, we've been doing Patriots 4th and 2 for over a decade now. And yep. And just given I think I don't want to speak for Russ, but I think just given just our schedules, kind of what Russ wanted to do, we thought it would be fun to just kind of give you more content and kind of split up formats a little bit. Russ wanted to do a more regular solo show. Steve and I were going to continue to do our weekly show, and which we've been doing and we will continue to do throughout the year. But then again, I don't know if Steve's going to be a regular contributor, but one of the best columns out there, especially on Sunday, is Steve's news and notes that he posts on PatsFans.com. And like Steve said, he joined Russ to discuss it last week, and hopefully they will do that again soon. So keep an eye out for those kind of shows. Again, Steve and I will still be here, every week, and Russ will be doing his shows continuously as he can kind of put out more content. So we'll have a couple different things here, which is exciting. And then next week we'll probably be here around the same time. Next week, I would say on Friday. I think during the season we'll probably aim for closer to Tuesday or Wednesday. But I think with the preseason games, a lot of them being Thursday, joint practices, etc., we'll wait till the day after each preseason game the next couple of weeks so that we can kind of give some instant analysis. I'm sure there'll be plenty of discussion for all the joint practices. If anything seriously breaks, obviously Steve and I will try to hop on and do something, but I think what we'll probably do for the next couple of weeks is just, monitor the training camp practices. I'd love to be in Lambeau because some of the best hamburgers I've ever had, and a fun place to be. And I always love a good time in Nashville, but I will be instead sweating here in Scottsdale, Arizona over the next couple of weeks. And Steve and I will continue to go ahead and, keep you updated and give you our takes each week for the next couple of weeks around this time. For Steve Balestrieri, I'm Derek Havens. Again, I want to thank everyone for listening to Patriots 4th and 2, brought to you by PatsFans.com. Please, again, one last time, subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, wherever you listen to podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review. Keep us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. We appreciate you all joining us, and we are looking forward to seeing you all next week.